should be good to go.
Thank you, Linda, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting of Broughton District Council. I'd just like to remind everybody that this is being recorded and live streamed onto YouTube, so please be aware of that. Also around the general etiquette that we have in using the virtual technology. So again, if anyone wishes to speak, please can you raise your hand, either physically or raise it in the chat, which I personally find a lot easier to use, but if you want to raise your hand physically, then please do so. You'll then be invited to speak. When you're not speaking, please can I ask you to keep yourself on mute. It just stops a lot of the background noise and the feedback that comes through. Okay, so we'll move forward then to declarations of interest. So we'll just go round, do a roll call on declarations of interest, and as part of that roll call, just to let everyone know who's here. So over to you, James.
Yes, Councillor Copplestone, do you have any declarations of interest?
Present, no declarations of interest, thank you.
Councillor Emsall.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Hempsall.
I'm here, nothing to declare. Sorry, could somebody just change to Councillor Alana Hempsall? If I try and do it, I'll delete myself off the screen somehow. I know it. So, but yeah, thank you.
We'll rename you. Yeah. Councillor Leggett.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Vincent.
Present and no declaration of interest.
And Councillor Wymark.
Present and no declarations of interest.
And I'll ask the other members present if they have any declarations. Councillor Adams. Councillor Adams, you're muted.
Yeah, yeah, you caught me out there, James. Yeah, no, no declaration of interest.
Councillor Brennan.
No declarations, thank you, James.
Councillor Protton.
No declarations.
And Councillor Riley.
No declarations.
Thank you. That's all done.
Thank you, James. Sorry, just having to unmute. Okay, there are no apologies for absence because we're all here, so we can move on from that piece. That moves us on then to item 3, the Cabinet minutes of the 21st of July. Again, just picking up on the bits we covered previously, was to do with the recovery plan from COVID-19, the Broughton business plan, and the environmental strategy were the key elements in there. Can I take those as being okay? Is there anything in there for anyone that needs to be updated, changed, or amended? Judy.
Sorry about that. Yes, I'd just like to refer to page 10. The paragraphs are unnumbered, but 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th and 6th paragraphs start with she as opposed to the portfolio holder, which I think is the normal terminology. Could that be changed, please?
I will do.
We'll get those changed, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other amendments, then I'll take those as being okay and sign those off. All those in favour?
That looks to be unanimous.
Chairman, I wasn't present, so I can't vote.
Okay. Right, so that moves us on then to public speaking. Do we
There's
have
no
any
public speaking.
No public speaking this evening. There's a number of members who are not on the cabinet with us tonight, so good evening to you. Just looking around, so we've got Sue and Nigel, obviously Steve and Tony, who we touched on earlier, so welcome. And again, if there's anything you want to ask or want to take part in any of the conversations or debates, just let me know. And if it's appropriate or relevant, then obviously we can bring you in at that point in time. That moves us on then to overview and scrutiny. They say good evening, Steve and Tony. So welcome you two. Is there anything you want to add at this point, Steve, or do you want to do it as we go through?
Yeah, as we go through, there was some amendments, Sean. So I'll just cover those as we go through after, you know, the officers, etc. In a normal way. Thank you, Sean.
Okay, that certainly will. Thank you for that, Steve. That moves us on then to the economic success panel. So, Joe, did you want to just introduce the minutes?
Yes, thank you very much. We met on the 22nd of July, and I would just like to point out on page 15 in the second paragraph, it talks about 3% of properties in the area do not meet 15 megabits of broadband speed. That should actually be changed to 2%. Then I just note, I can't talk about the exempt minutes, so I'll leave that to later. Thank you. If I just like to recommend those to Cabinet. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Joe. We'll receive those minutes. Obviously, you'll have to get those updated at your panel when you sign them off. But okay, that then moves us on to item 9, being the Environment Excellent panel. So, Judy, do you want to introduce yours?
Yes, I think most of the discussion was with the exclusion of the press and public. So I recommend the minutes to you all. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Judy. We'll receive your minutes. So thank you for that. That moves us on then to the wellbeing panel, which is an additional item to the agenda. It was on the supplementary papers that came through. It's numbered as number 19, but I'll do it at this point. It seems relevant to do it here while receiving the minutes of the different panels. So you have before you the wellbeing panel minutes. As I say, they're on page 345 of your supplementary papers. Fran, do you want to just come in there?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the wellbeing panel discussed mandatory licensable houses in multiple occupation fees across the two councils. Basically, I mean, we're coming on to this item 11. There was no agreement of the panel at that point. Obviously, I think we're getting another presentation tonight, and it'd be good to speak about this again. But as I say, there was no agreement there, and I see from ONS there was no agreement there either of the fees put forward. So I mean, that was it really. Yeah, there was no agreement, and at the time of the wellbeing panel, there was no other proposition put forward by the panel members. I say obviously I've seen from ONS that there was an alternative proposition put forward, and obviously we can discuss that when we get to the item. But that's all. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Fran. I also noticed that the panel has met again since July, but we've not received those minutes. I assume we'll receive those at the next Cabinet meeting, will we?
Yes, Chairman, they'll be going along to that meeting because you'll also be discussing the homelessness strategy at that meeting.
Okay, thank you, James. Yeah, so again, a little perplexed as to why we then have the mandatory license houses in multiple occupation on the agenda on the basis that the panel didn't recommend it to Cabinet, but I guess we'll deal with that when we get there. So thank you for that, Fran. So we'll receive your minutes. That moves us on to item 10, which is the Norfolk-wide Fighting Fund. So this is the fund that's being established across Norfolk, clues in the title, and it picks up the different aspects of a number of initiatives and things that have been running across the leader group for Norfolk in trying to bring together this fund. It's quite a considerable fund that gives us access to. So I'm just going to invite Rodney to present that to us. Rodney?
Thank you, Chair. As you say, it's a short report, very much in order to, as you say, do this Norfolk-wide fund to help businesses in response to COVID-19. A large amount of the funding is proposed to come from the business rates pool, which members will be aware is the money that's set aside from the growth in business rates. But the proposal is that Norfolk County Council would put £1 million into this pot, and each of the districts would put £150,000 into the pot in order to create a larger pot for the whole of Norfolk. But obviously we'll be keen to ensure that businesses in our area receive their proportionate share of this funding. This is a fast moving sort of proposal, and therefore we don't have the detailed information on exactly how we're going to be allocating this money. And that's very much why this proposal is set out to say, do we agree in principle, and obviously to asking for a delegation to myself in conjunction with the leader actually make that final decision to award this money to the fund, depending on the agreement on the actual mechanism for making the payments out. And just regarding the funding, since we reported last time on COVID-19, this council has received another 173,000 in funding from central government to help towards our COVID-19 response. So this money could obviously be used to actually offset that cost of that £150,000 contribution. And I think I'll leave it there and open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rodney. Thank you for putting that forward. Yeah, I'd say it's a fund that's got total value of 6.7 million, which is quite a sizable fund. And obviously with our contribution of 150,000, that's a sort of 45-fold increase on the value that we're putting in. So it's quite considerable. And it's there hopefully to assist businesses and tourists and elements in the Broadland area, but also the wider Norfolk area. So as Rodney has said, we need to just make sure that our criteria fits with the requirements that we have. The recommendation is at 4.1, and I'd just like to recommend to Cabinet that we
Councillor Hempsell has a question she's put in chat.
Okay, thank you for that, Linda.
And
so,
then Councillor Riley has put something in after that. Sorry.
Thank you, Linda. So I just recommend that to Cabinet, and then we'll move on to pick up questions. So just coming those in order. So I've got Judy first in chat.
No, that was the previous one. I think Councillor Hempsell is on this item.
Councillor Hempsell? Lana?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm just trying to avoid the yapping puppy. I'm really sorry. Right, Rodney, I have a question. It does mention that some of the business funding will be sector specific to tourism. Are there any criteria that are going to be worked around that? I mean, clearly, you know, in a separate life, I'm appointed to the Broads Authority, which is struggling with the effect that COVID and lockdown has had on the hire boat or just boating industry generally. So has anything been worked up along those lines as to what's going to happen with the funds? Is it going to be, you know, particular sector specific, or is it just generally, you know, tourism orientated?
I must admit, I don't have specific details at the moment, but my understanding there is going to be a fund relating to reopening tourism and an adaptations fund for tourism, but I don't have the specific details of exactly what the criteria for those funds would be. So apologies for that. I think it's still being developed.
Again, perhaps if I can add a bit more, as this is developing through the Norfolk Leaders Group, the focus was around tourism and getting tourism across Norfolk going again. But as Rodney has said, that the detail just isn't available yet. So it's fast moving, and we're still trying to work out the criteria to deliver that.
Can I just briefly come back? It's just that some tourism sectors have higher overheads than others, so to speak. So, you know, some involve, you know, significant numbers of staff, and maintenance work and just basically significant overheads. Some of them are covered by the furlough scheme, some of them not. So I just wonder how sensitive and what input you were seeking in terms of, how to develop that. That was all. I'm happy to help with suggestions if that's useful.
Yeah, that would be. So thank you for that. Yeah, we just need to feed back the information back to through the officers team to pull this together. So once we know more, then we can then share that back out around what the criteria is and how that will work and how that will impact across, and therefore how there can be drawn down against that. Okay, Steve, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, just in relation to the recommendation from the officers, there was a similar point actually being made as Lana's point just now, which came up during the meeting and in discussion with Rodney, and that was around the budgeting of this. As you can see, we completely supported the initiative and what's going on there, as you've already said, Sean. We did have a slight amendment on that, and which was on the condition that greater clarity be obtained regarding the budget allocation of the fund. So it's really down the same sort of road that Lana's raising that as well, and that was being flagged up really in this amendment, Sean.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Yeah, it's as both myself and Rodney has said, that's one of the things that we're looking at is around the criteria and how we make it work. Hence the reason at this point in time it's a provisional agree to do this on the basis that it works for us and we want to remain part of that. So it's the way in which it's been set up, but it should benefit both Norfolk and Broadland as we go forward. So hopefully once we get the criteria right, we'll be able to then take that forward.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
Okay, notes from chat that Trudy has seconded the recommendation. Are there any other questions before we move on to the vote? No, I can't see any other questions. Okay, so over to you, James, to do the roll call on the vote.
Councillor Copplestone.
4.
Councillor Emsall.
4.
Councillor Hempsall.
Yes.
Councillor Leggett.
4.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
4.
Councillor Vincent.
4.
And Councillor Wymark.
4.
That's unanimous and carried.
Thank you, James. Okay, so that moves on then to item 11, although it's badged in the papers as item 10, but it's item 11. The reports before you on the houses of multiple occupation fees. So this is something we're now going to go through. Obviously, you've had chance to read the papers, and the papers are before you. There's quite a lot of reports, quite a lot of financial information here around the way in which the fees have been calculated. I can't see Kevin, so Louise, is that?
Yeah, that's
you?
me. I'll speak on behalf of Kevin.
Okay, so Louise, if you'd like to introduce your report.
Okay, thank you. The report recommends a single licence fee for houses in multiple occupation. The Housing Standards team has really embraced the one team working. We've really got together and put in place an aligned policy and procedure for licensing houses in multiple occupation. We've aligned all of our paperwork, our systems, and it's the same officers doing the work across both districts. So the next step really is what we recommend is to align the licence fee. Currently, there is a difference which you can clearly see in table 4.2 of the report. The recommendation is for Broadland's licence fee to be increased to the single fee of £825.52. Now, I know in wellbeing panel and overview and scrutiny, committee, there were concerns about the increase in fee being passed on to tenants of houses in multi-occupation, and the housing standards team response to that really is that we do very much recognise that this is an extremely important, they're extremely important properties housing extremely vulnerable residents, some of the most vulnerable in our districts. The last thing we want to do is for that to be that fee to be passed over. I've done a couple of calculations which may sort of put it into a bit more reality for you. So the £825 proposed fee is for a period of 5 years. It's a 5-year licence. So if I break that down to an annual fee, so landlords often have to pay annual insurance, for example. So if you do it on an annual basis, that's £165 per year. Per week, that's £3.17 extra. And per day, that's 45 pence extra. So if you offset that against a licensed property, so the houses in multiple occupation which require a license are those which have a minimum of 5 persons occupying the property. So if you've got a minimum of 5 lots of rental income per month, then you can see that the expense can be absorbed. I appreciate there are other costs involved, obviously. The only other thing to say was that the housing standards team would obviously be open to the option to do annual payment instalments if it would make it easier. I know if I had a property and I was renting it out and you had to pay for a licence, an annual fee of £165 would obviously have come across as being a much more reasonable prospect than paying out the £825 all in one go. So there is the option to offer those instalment payments, which would be a bit more reasonable towards the landlord. Ultimately, the licence procedure is in place to ensure there's the safety of the occupants. So that's the primary thought. And the costings in Appendix A and Appendix B have been really carefully thought through. Officers from the team have got together, we've thought through the process step by step, we've worked out what the processes involve, how the actual time involved, and that's what we have calculated the fee to be. The renewal, the recommendation also proposes a renewal fee of, at the end of the 5-year period, of £514.30. Currently, there isn't a renewal fee specified for Broadland District Council, so at the end of the 5-year licence period, we would, at present, we would just charge the same fee again, which, as you can see from the text, is currently a minimum of £593. I say a minimum because that £595 is based upon 5 persons occupying the property. If there's an additional tenant over that 5, then there's an additional fee of £28.50 per occupant. So as a minimum, that 5-year licence fee in Broadland currently is £593 plus per occupant £28.50. So it could actually go up higher and be, not far off what we propose anyway, potentially. So if we don't sort of go with the recommended renewal fee, it would just be the same £593 current fee that we currently charge, which again would be higher than what is actually proposed. The variation fee we do propose to put up slightly because it doesn't accurately reflect what we do in practice. I'm very confident that what is laid out before you in Appendix A and Appendix B, that reflects the cost of the service. That's our time that we put in. It is what we do. And I'd be happy to stand up before a property tribunal, a court of law to say that this is our process. We did the other option after wellbeing panel that we did consider what else we could put forward to you, because we had only really made the recommendations, as you can see within the report, which weren't favoured. So we came up with an additional proposal of perhaps £700 licence fee. That wasn't specifically aimed at, we didn't get that from anything, because as I said, the costs worked out in Appendix A and B, that's what we've worked out, that is the cost of the service. So the £700 really was put forward as an alternative in the middle proposal, just to see if that would be more acceptable to you. But Overview and Scrutiny Committee, they didn't sort of seem to be in favour of either of those, and sort of voted towards staying with the existing current fee, which my main concern about that would be we've got one team working across both districts, doing exact same officers, same procedures, same documentation, and there's two separate charges, which can go, but as you know, yeah, you just have to be able to justify that. The report highlights important case law, which specifically goes into that the licence fee has to be accountable, it has to be accurate, and you can't profit. So I very much have that in mind as a case law precedent, and the proposed fee is not. We're not aiming to make a profit here. This just reflects the cost.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Fran, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, obviously, as I said earlier, and Louise said again, you know, we did talk this around quite a lot, really, at the Wellbeing Panel, and we didn't come to a conclusion at all. There wasn't a consensus view, really, unfortunately, and there wasn't an alternative put forward. I know we questioned many times about the officer cost and how that was broken down, and I know we've had figures from the accounts, but it still seems, I mean, to be honest, I think everyone found it quite difficult still to equate the fact that, you know, an officer would be costing £85,000 a year, you know, with all the on costs. So I know I found we did find that quite difficult to really take on board, to be frank. I know, obviously, we talked about the case in law, Westminster versus Hemmings, and obviously that was found that a council should not make a profit, and clearly we shouldn't make a profit, and I understand that that we shouldn't, but that doesn't mean that we have to cover all of our costs. Potentially we could consider, as you said, £700 or keeping things as they are. I mean, I see Steve wants to speak from ONS, and I know ONS had a view. I think it's important to listen to all the members, and it feels that the members are not at this moment in time in support of increasing fees, whatever the situation is with another council. And I think it's important to remember, you know, and this is something that has been said repeatedly, that we are still a sovereign council, and therefore any policy we put forward will be a Broadland policy. So I think that's as much as I want to say right now, and if the Chairman's happy, we'll move on to Steve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Fran. Yeah, it is. I guess what we need to do is recognise the work that's gone into producing these numbers. Again, they support the fee as is proposed. They also support the fee as it is now, and the middle ground that was also being proposed. So there's a whole host of different ways that you could definitely look at this. I've got Lana, you wanted to come in, and also Steve and Tony. So Lana?
Yeah, I'm happy to give way to the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny if that's more appropriate, but otherwise, you know, my question to Louise is, the report touches on the case law, and you did say that any fees set have to be three things. Do they have to be all three or just one? Because the summary of the case law says that the council was found to be making a profit, which the judge ruled against. But the three criteria you mentioned sort of address this things in a slightly different way. So, you know, do we have to meet all three criteria, or is just one enough?
I think they, all three really. They have to be reasonable, proportionate, and accountable, that accurately reflect the cost of the service. So that's what we've put forward in the appendix. I mean, there is the option to charge an alternative fee, as has been suggested, but my only concern there would be it's a sort of a postcode lottery. It's the same sort of service being offered, but because you're in different areas, a landlord could potentially have properties in both areas, but be paying different fees. So
I think that's quite reasonable, and something that tenants do expect to, you know, if you do have, you know, it's a postcode lottery with how much council tax you pay, as I know. So I don't think that that's necessarily a reason to synchronise across the board. So okay, right, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Lana. Steve, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Sean. Yeah. When we went through this, I know at our pre-ONS meeting, the minute for the wellbeing panel had not been submitted to the to cabinet agenda, and that was just an oversight. I found out, but I did ask for that to be sent to me, and I found it really interesting reading, because it was a much longer minute than normal, Sean, and as Fran's aware as well, it was quite verbatim as well. It really reflected the concerns that's being raised, the amount of work the officers were putting into it, and there's a bit of a dichotomy involved with that in terms of some positioning around, well, we've got one officer team, and therefore wouldn't it be a good idea to have them operating on the same pricing policy, if you like, and then also, the clarification around what the legal judgment was around, which also I've checked out myself as well. And the real imperative of that legal judgment was about not making profit. And then when you do charge, make sure it's a robust decision. So that's really what the imperative is. The imperative isn't that the council should charge the appropriate amount in terms of whatever it costs it. That was not the subject matter of that decision whatsoever. So we've got real clarity on that now. The local authority, as we all know, is a sovereign local authority. Next to Broadland, we've got Bretland, we've got Norwich, all charging different amounts. So there is no legal issues here whatsoever. And as Lana's just said, quite correctly, where you live, you have different things, different council tax bands, different amount paid, a whole range of differences going on. And that's just, we know where we live and there's different charges for it. It wouldn't cause, I believe, our council or our officers any problem whatsoever if we did have the two different fees. In terms of council time as well, well, we've got that fee for Broadland, we've got that fee for there. It's pretty simple and doesn't really take up any more time. In terms of the amount, yeah, as Fran said, post to the meeting, the officers have come up with this suggestion of 700. And when I was questioning this as well, the reasoning for the 700 was, well, to make it a bit more reasonable. We then focused around, well, what was the existing fee at the moment? So the existing fee at the moment does cover some costs. However, there was an important point that the officer just mentioned here. When you look at these properties, the people being housed are primarily very, very vulnerable people. They're people that have been perhaps homeless under the age of 25. They have all kinds of difficulties, and the £12 a month or thereabouts that's being talked about here would get passed on by the landlords in all probability, because it's just a cost on tight regimes for them in terms of their costing around these buildings that would probably get passed on. So a vulnerable person on benefits, struggling, £12 a month matters. It's a lot. The additional benefit we get is a few £1,000s in terms of this when you work it all through, in terms of covering officers' time. So it's a little cost to us, but a huge cost to those tenants, and helping to support those tenants. And as Fran knows, in terms of helping to support their well-being and health as well. So all in all, this is why we came to the conclusions we came to, and the recommendation to maintain it as it is, Sean. And I don't think I've missed anything, Sean, and I hope I've explained that okay with clarity. And yes, that's the reason why we gave that recommendation, Sean.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Tony, from a ONS point of view? I see you wanted to speak as well.
Thank you, Sean. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, basically, I don't know, but I was elected as a Broadland District Councillor to look after the residents of Broadland to the best of my ability. And that is what this recommendation from ONS is all about. Steve is quite right when he says that to me, £12 would not be a great deal, quite honest. But somebody who's absolutely on the breadline, £12 is a heck of a lot of money, hell of a lot of money. Do we really need it? No, we don't. I mean, what are our balances? 17, 18 million pounds? And also, even Louise admitted that these are the most vulnerable people in our district. So I feel we have a duty as Broadland councillors, not to just because South Norfolk is going down that road, or the officers will find it difficult to work because one has got one and one has got the other. Sorry, that doesn't cut any ice for me, Sean, at all. All I'm interested in is the residents of Broadland that I have been elected to represent. And as I said, if it means that we're going to implement a different charge and that will cause problems to the officers, while we are, as Steve said, and as Lana said, we are a sovereign body. We are Broadland District Council. And we are independent of any other council and what any other council does. So, Chairman, I do strongly urge the Cabinet to adopt the recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny. Put your residents, the residents that have elected you as councillors, first. Thank you, Sean.
Could I?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. That was a heartfelt plea. So thank you for putting that over in that way. I guess from my point of view, there's a few questions I've got to ask around this as well. Obviously, the current fee is just under £600. Looking at the wellbeing minutes or the panel's minutes, it would seem that we have about 3 of these a year on average, and the fee somewhere between 650 and 677 as a usual number, which again is not far from what's being proposed as a new number. Also note on Appendix A, and I guess there's a question for you, Louise, on how many lettings is that based? Could you answer that one for me, please?
Well, the recommended fee is for unlimited. It's not dependent on the number of occupants. So it's a standard set fee regardless of the number of occupants. The thing that I was should have mentioned.
Can I just come back on that then, please?
Yeah,
so are you saying the work is the same whether it be 5 people, 10 people, or 15 people in occupancy?
No, well. Yeah, potentially, because it involves, we've allowed for an inspection time to go around the property and view all of the rooms. So yeah, that would be based on an average inspection time.
Yeah, so what's that average based on? Is it based on 5, 10, 15? What number is it based on? Obviously the number we're comparing it to is based on 5,
yeah,
with an additional multiplier above that.
Yeah, we've based it on a standard inspection of a 5-bedroom property. Just going around and doing, and not only the inspection, it's the additional costs involved in doing. See that the recommended fee, the previous Broadland fee was based upon the old licensing regime. New licensing legislation came in 2018, October 2018, which brought in more stringent conditions and controls that we have to look into and check. And some of those are room size measurements, gas safety checks, electrical checks. So it's the costs involved in doing all of those additional things compared to what we used to do. So we've included all of those within it.
Okay, thank you for that. I saw that Jamie, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you caught me off guard there. I hadn't got my mute button pressed. Thank you very much. I just in response to Councillor Adams' points, I just wanted to maybe reinforce a couple of things that Louise presented, which may have not come across in his interpretation. I think one is the fact of the matter is, on professional advice, this is what the service costs. I think we have the ability by law to charge back against that cost. I think Louise has been through an incredibly thorough process, and she's given her professional credibility to that analysis. So we kind of take that as read, really. I know there'll be lots of questions around how we've come to those figures, but I would 100% endorse what Louise has presented in terms of the factual account of cost of the matter. Anything that Cabinet choose to charge to residents is entirely a discretionary matter. There's no obligation to charge the full amount. It's something we have the ability to do. And I can see in the comment that Rodney's asked to talk. I can maybe steal his thunder slightly and say that I think the advice of officers is in keeping with the commercial strategy to take advantage of our opportunity to charge where we have that opportunity. So I think the advice is given in respect of previous decision on the commercial strategy. But as I repeat, this isn't about harmonisation across two councils. It's about recognising there is a single officer team with a single way of doing business across the two councils. Therefore, we have no other option than to say the cost of the service is the same, because it is. That is just a factual account. Anything that Cabinet decide to do beneath that cost is completely and entirely a discretionary matter and can be dealt with in terms of the way the officer team facilitate this. I just wanted to make that distinction, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. I guess just picking up on that point, is there an element here where there is a different cost due to the makeup of the two districts as you were looking at the two across? I just remember from a previous conversation when you introduced me to a word that I hadn't come across before around rurality.
It's one of our favourites, Chair. I would bow to Louise's judgment on this. My immediate thought would be no, not really, because we're talking about quite low levels of HMOs that are tending to focus themselves around specific areas of our collective district. I wouldn't imagine travel time is a big factor of our consideration, but Louise, please shoot me down if I've got that wrong.
No, that's correct. I mean, the other thing that I would like to say, during overview and scrutiny, questions were asked about the approximate numbers over the last 5 years. Just to sort of clarify that a little bit, as I said, the licensing, mandatory licensing legislation came in at October 2018. So we've only really got a 2-year period to look at. So over that 2 years, Broadland currently has 14 HMOs licensed. South Norfolk has 24. That's very much based upon reactive work only. We've basically provided the information. We've done mail outs to landlords saying this is the requirements, and we've purely relied on those landlords coming to us saying I've got a property and I need to license it. We haven't. What we really want to do now is increase the proactivity. We're already doing increased visits with police, fire service, and our communication with other departments within the councils. Council tax, for example, that's really picking up now. So since over lockdown, we have actually licensed about 5 properties. So we really want to increase that and work with our landlords and just engage with them more. So the license fee is for the landlords. And we do have, I just want to sort of re-emphasise, we do have the option, the possibility of providing payment instalments. So we could break that down for landlords to make it easier for them.
Okay, thank you, Louise. I'm still at that place with this where I'm looking at it and seeing what you've done is a good piece of work and it just supports where we currently sit. I see, Fran, you wanted to come back in. Is it an opportunity for you just to sum up and take us forward?
Thanks, Chairman. I did see that Emma and Rodney wanted to speak, so I don't know if you want to let them speak first.
I think Jamie stole Rodney's thunder, as I was going to, but Jamie got there first. Emma, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just think it's worth, there's a point that Councillor Adams made, and I'd just like either Jamie or Louise to come back on that point, because I think it's really important. Councillor Adams talks about the HMOs passing the cost on to the tenant. Am I right in the belief that that's actually illegal to do that? I just think it's a really important point that we need to pick up that was made during the conversation, please.
Well, it's not illegal, but the landlords have a responsibility to charge sort of reasonable rents, but we have no sort of jurisdiction over what they do charge, unfortunately. But it's a market, isn't it? So I mean, the rents have to be reasonable and for the tenants to be affordable for the tenants.
Okay, thanks, Louise. I just think it's an important thing to make, because we are making assumptions and we need to base the decision on the facts in front of us. I just thought it was important to clarify that, Chairman.
I think it's important to also say that a lot of landlords, the majority of landlords that I deal with, they are responsible and they're operating a business and they want to look after they don't want to, they're not against their tenants. They want to keep their tenants happy, and they're reasonable people and good business people. So I don't think we should assume that they will automatically do the wrong thing and pass it over completely.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess it comes back to the rent will be a commercial rent that the landlord will be paying, and they'll be committed to through the lease, and how that is changed and is reevaluated. Back to you, Fran.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Obviously, I know there's lots of differing views here, and obviously yourself, Chairman, you actually sort of highlighted the fact that currently our average fees are around £650 to £700. I know ONS talks about this a lot, and I say wellbeing do too, and I think it's really important to listen to the members. We don't have to make a profit or even break. Well, obviously we're not allowed to make profit, that's illegal, but we don't have to even break even here as a service. As long as we can provide the service, then that's the right thing to do for our residents. So on that basis, I would like to propose that we actually follow ONS's recommendation that the council fees for the mandatory licensable houses, in multiple occupation, remain as is for now. Okay, so that would be my recommendation, that we stay as we is for now, because I believe that is what the members want, and I think the residents would too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Fran. So the recommendation then is for the fees to remain as they are now. I'll second that, following Fran's proposal. I guess we need to go to vote, James, so over to you.
Chairman? Councillor Copplestone, are you for the proposal?
For, please. Thank you.
Councillor Emsall?
For.
Councillor Hempsall?
For.
Councillor Leggett?
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle?
For.
Councillor Vincent?
For.
And Councillor Wymark?
For.
Amended proposal is carried.
Okay, thank you for that, James. Just a quick question, I guess I could ask it of you, Emma, around the actual this coming forwards. I understand it went to the panel, and the panel didn't recommend it to Cabinet. Should that not have gone back to the panel before coming to Cabinet?
So in terms of the panel, Chairman, they're not a decision-making body. So they've had a report, they've received a report, and they're providing Cabinet with their view on that report. Therefore, that's why it ended up in front of Cabinet for you to then decide what you want to do with the next steps. It's because they're not a decision-making body, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Emma. Okay, so that moves us on then to item 12, although again in the reports it's actually noted as being item 5 for some reason.
I'm afraid, Chairman, that was in the hard copies that I sent you. It was picked up later, so it's in the electronic versions as item 12.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for correcting it, James. So moving on then to the local development scheme. I believe Helen, I can see you now. Yes. Hello, Helen. Good evening to you.
Good evening, everybody.
So this is for you to present to us, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will just give a brief overview because it is something that Cabinet has seen before, in that we do have a duty under the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act to agree a local development scheme, which is prepared by each local planning authority to outline its programme for the production of the new local plan. In this instance, it relates to the Greater Norwich Local Plan. It has already been considered by the Greater Norwich Development Partnership on the 10th of July, but then each local planning authority has to agree the revised timetable. So if I take you to page 46 of your agenda papers, it outlines the revised timetable. And the key changes here are that we are proposing an additional consultation in December 2020, which covers things such as a focus consultation to allow the Greater Norwich Development Partnership to reflect the considerable progress being made on the Norwich Western Link, and also to update on other evidence base that is coming forward. That does mean there is a delay to the Reg 19 process. So that is now proposed to be at August-September 21 instead of January-March 2021, which means the final adoption of the local plan takes us to November-December 2022 instead of August-September 22. So therefore, the recommendation is to approve the proposed amendments to the local development scheme to council to approve. I just would like to put a caveat. Obviously, we've had the white paper published on planning for the future. At the moment, this timetable still stands and we need to agree that, but clearly any reflection on anything that may come forward would have to come back to members. But this is on the current timetable for the current Greater Norwich local plan as published at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for putting that over, Helen. Yes, I think since this was proposed by the Greater Norwich Development Partnership, events have somewhat taken over with the publishing of the white paper and the changes that that's proposing. Although, as you rightly say, they are proposals at this point in time, they are not what we're working to. Hence the reason that we still have to progress this. Over to you, Lana. Do you want to add anything?
I suppose, and I've always said that the local development scheme is a snapshot of a particular position in time, and you know, the Polaroid paper just got even cheaper than before because, you know, as we were discussing this, things were happening down in government that none of us knew about, and yes, so we have wonderful new legislation to consider and see what that brings out. But you know, it's absolutely right and proper that we bring these amendments to Cabinet to recommend to Council to approve, because otherwise, you know, what we do doesn't really stand up anymore. Helen did mention the Western Link, and I'm just going to put a short plug in for all members here present and all members watching from home that we have organised a briefing, which is an extremely important briefing that our, I think, collective input and knowledge of would be very gratefully received by the council, as this is an integral part of the local plan moving forward. So on that basis, I'd like to put to Cabinet to recommend to council to approve the amendments to the local development scheme as it stands at the moment. And yeah, looking for a seconder around the room.
Okay, thank you for that, Lana. I'll second that for you.
Thank you.
Sorry, you mentioned about a briefing. Is there a date for that you want to share, or has that not been set yet?
Oh, it has. It's at, I mean, clearly this is a member-only briefing. I presume officers will probably be welcome, but it's at on Thursday at 5 p.m. on Zoom. So Amy has sent out the invite to everybody once already. I've sent out one reminder, and now I'm just appealing to all members. I know the Western Link might see remote from places where I live in Acle. However, you know, as Councillor Adams rightfully pointed out, we are elected to, you know, represent our district as a whole and not just our particular corner of these beautiful woods that we call home. So, yeah.
Okay,
Please come along.
Thank you for that, Lana. So it's Thursday at 5 p.m. For all those that are interested and can make it. Coming back to the item here, so the recommendation is before us and has been seconded. Over to you, James.
Councillor Copplestone, are you in favour of the recommendation?
For, thank you.
Councillor Emsall.
For.
Councillor Hempsall.
For.
Councillor Leggett.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
For.
Councillor Vincent.
For.
And Councillor Wymark.
For.
And that's unanimous. It's carried.
Thank you, James. Okay, that moves us on then to item 13, being the waste services review. Again, just picking up on the fact that we've got some considerable reports and lots of paperwork associated to this that we've been through a number of times. So we have that with us if we need it. We also have Jamie as our resident expert, who can obviously pick up any of the particular details that we need at that point in time. So I'd like to start by just asking Judy to introduce the item.
Thank you very much, Chair. Right, Cabinet agreed for the production of a business case for a local authority trading company to supply waste and street cleansing services. And this was because the Eunomia report had shown that councils working together could make savings, and that a local authority trading company had the opportunity to make the most savings on this big spend for the districts. Thus, we had a duty to consider a local authority trading company before we considered going to procurement. The business case is comprehensive, and once again, I thank all the officers who contributed to this lengthy report. And so the report enabled members to make an objective decision. The report has been shared with all Broadland councillors, and it was shared at an early stage, and so has subsequently been through the Environment Excellence Panel and obviously ONS, where there was considerable debate. Certainly at the Environment Excellence Panel, there was considerable debate, and we considered all the points. However, considering all the aspects and the associated risks, we concluded that the council should not move to a local authority trading company, but that we should commence a procurement process for the supply of waste and street cleansing services. So, put simply, I would like to propose that we receive the business case, and that I would propose that we agree recommendation 4. And that is that we commence a procurement exercise for the council's waste services and street cleansing contract, and delegate the process of procurement up to the award of contract to the portfolio holder for environmental service excellence, the portfolio holder for finance, and the director of people and communities. You will note that's slightly different than is in the covering paper. We've included the portfolio holder for finance now. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Judy, for putting forward the recommendation, which I will second. James, just really picking up that you picked up the change on the recommendation.
Indeed.
With that?
But it holds for finance as well, yes.
Okay, thank you. So that then brings us then to any questions or comments that people have. I see, Emma, you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, I would like to come in. I appreciate that I've been on leave and the things have evolved whilst I've been on leave, but I would just like to remind members we have got the public report and the private session report, and I do think that we need a full discussion on this decision below the line. Would be my recommendation to you due to the decision that you're being asked to make, and I do think it warrants a discussion in private session before we move to formal vote. Would be my recommendation to you, Chairman, please.
Okay, thank you for that, Emma. I hear what you're saying, but that was not our intent at this point in time. Our intent was to make a decision at this point. So we'll move on with that. So are there any other questions coming forward? Steve, you wanted to ask something?
Thank you, Chair. It was just really just on the report at ONS. There was an amendment there which didn't get supported, but it was in relation to the savings being identified within the report, and James confirmed this as well.
Steve.
Sorry, am I out of sync here?
No, you're okay. I just wanted to remind you that obviously there is an element that can't be shared in public
Sorry.
at this time. So
We've not gone there yet, have we?
no,
Sorry.
no, and you haven't ventured there yet. I was just a reminder in case you were venturing there. So if you want to carry on with your question at this point or not, up to you. Okay, I'll take that as a no, and we'll come back to that one. Okay, Jamie, you wanted to come in?
Chair, thank you. Just wanted to support Emma's point and express my own discomfort with out having had a full discussion in private session and knowing where Councillor Riley's point was going, and as part of the democratic process, unable to make that point whilst we remain in public session. Completely with you, Chair, obviously, but in standing in for the head of paid service right now, my advice would be to support Emma's suggestion.
Okay, thank you for that, Jamie. But as I said, we wanted to make a decision that was open. So we're at this point in time of making that decision, unless anyone else has any other questions. No? Okay, so the recommendation, just to remind, is in front of us, is on the one to note the business case. And then the second one is item 4 or recommendation 4 with the amendment of adding the finance portfolio holder as part of the sign off or part of the delegated authority in that. Have I got that right, Judy?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that. So James, that takes us to you for the roll call.
Yes. Councillor
Sorry,
Copples.
James, may I just, I'm really sorry, and it's not very often that I will pull my statutory officer card. I do need to make it really clear that I am very uncomfortable with this, the way that this has been dealt with this evening. We haven't had the robust discussion that we need to have at Cabinet before we've made this decision. My proposal would be that we go to private session and then come back to public to make the decision. I just need to make that, if you want to carry on, Chairman, as you are, then you can, but I do need to make that position. I am extremely uncomfortable with this.
Thank you for that, Emma. And for the third time of saying, yes, we will move on and make a decision. So James, back to you.
Councillor Copplestone, are you for the proposal?
For, please, thank you.
Councillor Emsall.
For.
Councillor Hempsall.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm concerned. I don't understand why Emma's concerned. That hasn't been explained adequately. So I feel a bit stuck because I know what her statutory responsibilities are, and so I'm just a bit stuck because I don't understand why what the issue is. I don't know what you want me to do. You know, in principle, I am for, but I need to really understand why the monitoring officer is as anxious as she is, because I don't understand at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for that, Lana. Sorry, I didn't mean for you to feel anxious, but this is a Cabinet decision and the Cabinet's deciding how to go forward around the recommendation that's before us, which is to start the procurement process for renewing the contract.
Yeah, I do understand that, but, you know, however, I am conscious that the monitoring officer has been away for 2 weeks and perhaps hasn't had the necessary input into the reports, you know, or the agenda as it is, and the recommendations, which she usually does. She does tend to put in any last minute alterations to us prior to the meeting, but I've never experienced her putting them through within the meeting. So that's why the nature of her concerns do ring alarm bells. So
okay, well, thank you for that, Lana. Again, all I would say is that the monitoring officer was involved prior to her holiday around briefing on how we wanted to take our vote on this, and that's where we are now, and we are now taking that vote. So I don't know if you want to vote at this point or whether you're going to...
Chairman, I think, you know, with due respect to the advice of the monitoring officer, I'd like to abstain. Thank you.
Okay, James, over to you.
Yes. Councillor Leggett.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
4.
Councillor Vincent
4.
and Councillor Wymark.
4.
So that's 6 for and 1 abstention. So that's carried.
Thank you, James. Okay, so that moves us on then to item 14, which is the exclusion of press and public. I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting